Well, good morning or afternoon or good night, depending on when you're listening to this. This is Karen Conley, and welcome to our Lead Like Jesus podcast. We're so grateful to have you with us today. And as we have transitioned to now having both an audio and video format, if you are joining us today by video, you will see that we have a fantastic guest with us. Let me introduce you to him. Peter, thank you so much for coming. This is Peter Demis, and Peter is the president and CEO of Demis Brands. And thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to learn from you today.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for letting me be here.
Well, as I was prepping for this podcast and had a little bit of an opportunity to read your bio and a lot of your accomplishments that you have had throughout your career, and even beyond the workplace, as I was reading some people talking about you and your character and who you are as a man, as a leader. I'm excited for all of our listeners and watchers to be able to learn from you today. And a lot of times we look at someone and all of their accomplishments and we think they have their act all together, and they always have. And we can never get where you are. We can never be the president and CEO. We can never be the top 20 leader in multiple cities that you've been recognized in. But maybe to just kind of move away from all the accolades, take us back a little bit before we talk about all the ways you've accomplished things, and tell us a little bit about the backstory before you got to be who we see you are as now. What is the journey that maybe in your early years and your formative years that will then bring us up to present?
So I started out, I've been in the restaurant business pretty much all my life. So my father, I'm fourth generation restaurant owner.
Wow.
And so my father he started a Western Sizzlin franchise and moved to Nashville when I was one.
Okay.
And they, from that, I had I would be around the restaurant business, he would have to take me along. I'd sit in on meetings that I didn't want to sit in on, and and I would just grab a book and read, and while he was doing it. But throughout the process, I learned from it. And then when I was 12 years old, I started working in restaurants or washing dishes, and then just did everything else from it, and said I wanted to have nothing to do with the restaurant business. I mean, I was adamant. There was no way I was going to do anything with it. And I ended up going to law school, became a lawyer. And in practicing law, I recognized that the reason why I wanted to do that was I wanted to help people. And in the practice of law, I felt like I really wasn't. I was more focused on billable hours or just winning. And it just never really seemed, even when you won, it didn't really seem like that's what the person needed or wanted. And while I was doing that, I was still working part-time at the restaurant. And so, and then finally I realized I got to reverse this in my life. And so I'm going to start working in restaurants and then part-time be a lawyer. And so, like, I still have my license up to date. You never want me in court because I haven't been in court in 20 years. But nevertheless, so that's where I got in the restaurant. Stayed in the restaurant business. And when I came back into the business, and took over the operations, and then purchased the restaurant from my father about 10 years ago, and so started kind of working at it from there. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes version of how I got to where I'm at right now. So.
Well, I know part of your journey is that you have made a transition in from being a great businessman to being someone who has put faith in front and center in your business. And obviously, as a group of people with Lead Like Jesus, we're always hungry and wanting to learn from people that who have made that transition. And then for those that are listening, and maybe they're like you and they're in their career and they're winning and they're getting billable hours, but they want to know, okay, how what does it look like really to put my faith first? Share with us a little bit. How did you make that leap? Why did you make that leap? Maybe let's start with that one. Why did you make that leap?
Well, I think the why and how actually kind of tie in together, truthfully. So I ended up, I was always in control, or so I thought. I always had to. Everything that I had to do was based off of that. So I had to control my work. I had to control my home. Everything was complete control, and I was, you know, worked way too many hours. Was, I wasn't. I didn't I didn't do anything like that was on the surface appeared wrong. Like I didn't cheat my employees. I didn't pay, I paid my taxes. I was kind to people for the most part. Spoke to them if I saw them. So I did those type of stuff, but in reality was I was hurting. My marriage was hurting. My job, jobs was just constantly felt like it was just slipping to the ground. Like I never was going to succeed, and I always needed more, and always wanted more. And how can I be better at what I'm doing? And then if anything didn't happen, I took it. I would get angry over it, and ended up, the man named Angus Buchan came to town, and Angus was a South African evangelist, and my wife and I would attend a local church, but I didn't really like church, and but so we would attend on occasion, and she said, "Hey, I need you to go hear him." And he was doing a men's conference. I refused to go. I'm like, you know what? I don't like going to normal church. I'm definitely not going to some, fanatical guy from South Africa who's preaching Jesus. That no way I'm doing that. And he said, so we so I ended up not going to that. And but we heard that he was preaching at the 10:30 or at our Sunday service. And so I told my wife, I said, well, we're going to 8:30 because you know what, we're going to go kind of fun afterward. But the truth of the matter was my wife can never be ready on time. I mean, she's late to everything. And then I'm like, I'm going to go to work early. You'll pick me up along the way, and then maybe we'll go have a picnic or something. It was a beautiful day. And so from that, I said, you need to, I know getting two kids ready by 8:30 in the morning, just not going to happen. So I figured that was just going to be my way. I was going to manipulate, what I was going to do. And sure enough, she got ready in plenty of time. I mean, like way in advance. We get to church, and like there's hardly anybody there. I thought, this is really odd. Our church is a very large church. And I thought, well, no big deal. And then the pastor comes out and says, if you're wanting to hear Angus, he's only doing the 10:30 service. He's not doing the early service. And I was like, oh, this is great. I don't get to hear him. I get to still have a great day. It was just going to be perfect. My wife, on the other hand, is angry, and it's that anger that you could feel. And so finally, after two more fights after that service, we end up having to come back for the 10:30 service, and I'm angry. And then so Angus did an altar call, and after he preached a sermon, and it was the first time that I felt compelled to do something. I wasn't forced to. It wasn't like I was a zombie, but I felt compelled to do something so much that I went up. And unlike most people where that's like great and wonderful, for me that was horrible. I felt like I was conned. I didn't know what was going on. And then through another series of events, and I talk about it in my book, Afraid to Trust, and about these series of events that led me actually in front of him the following day. And he asked me the question, if you're willing to die for your country, why are you afraid to speak out to God? And I did not realize no one ever called me afraid before. And I thought, that's really odd. And over the next 3 days, I slept 4 hours before finally I said, God, you win. I'm going to turn everything over to you. And that's where, so to answer the how I got there was through those events. And the why I got there was strictly because the Holy Spirit was introduced to my life for the first time. And then became the practical part of, how do I turn everything over? you know but at that point is when I relinquished all control. And when all that control was relinquished, the freedom that came from that, the release of the fear that came from it, I did not realize that the control that I had was really just a manifestation of the fear that I was carrying with me.
Mm.
And you don't realize it because fear kind of tricks yourself into all different avenues, whether it's jealousy, anger, control, manipulation. That's where the fear comes from.
Well, I love that you went into the details of really what that looked like, for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think everybody can relate, to that wrestling, and I just think about how many people might be listening now and think, oh yeah, I've manipulated like that too. Like, I mean, I've tried to, play the right, religious card, or I've tried to appease my husband or my wife, and yet I knew that I was kind of under the table trying to kind of manipulate things. So we all relate to that.
Yeah,
We've all.
I can't tell you how many times that I was in church and the basket comes around for it, and I would put the bare minimum in, so somebody would see me put the envelope in, but
Right.
therefore I really wasn't committing anything of any value whatsoever. But as long as it was important, you talk about the image and people looking like you're under control.
Right.
Back in the 70s and 80s, we were comparing ourselves to the Family on Growing Pains and Brady Bunch. Now we're comparing it to real life people on Facebook.
Mm,
So we're always looking and be like, oh man, look at them. If only I had their family, if only I acted like them. And
yeah,
and they're always constantly trying to make their image appear to be perfect instead of their heart to be real. And I think that makes a huge difference in it. And therefore we're all struggling in that area.
absolutely. Well, and that authenticity, like you just described in your own journey, I think, to any woman who's hoping her husband will come to church, you give them some hope that God will win in the end. And but also to know, it's not the glamorized version of Peter, it's the real deal. And that, I think, gives everybody hope that no, we all wrestle, we all have this journey, but God is faithful. And so walk us through, what did that look like as you began to say, okay, here I am. I'm letting go. I've been called out on my fear, and I'm choosing after 4 days of no sleep. What did that look like in those early days?
So the first part of it was, I was on fire. Like it was just one of those things. So the my basic practices was reading the Bible. I mean, I read the Bible cover to cover, and I've read it every day since then. I mean, it's just something that I got to do. And the days that I end up, not being able to read it first thing in the morning is just awful for me. Like I have to get it done, and
Right.
not as a check mark, but it's just I just have to get it done. And
Mhm.
but so I'm reading that and I'm on fire for everything, and people are wondering what's going on with me. And I tell you, when you're 40 years old and you announce you're going to be baptized, you get a lot of free lunches because people think you're dying, and so they want to take you to lunch and then say, hey, what's going on at the very end of the meal. The
Yeah.
first couple ones I thought, yeah, okay, what's going on. After a while, you start knowing exactly why you're going to lunch with them. But I was like, okay, so where is God leading? How does that work, and what does that entail? And a couple weeks after, another man came to our church and spoke. His name was Lance Lambert, and Lance is in heaven now. He one of the things that he said that struck me was, he said the children of England don't know the stories of the Bible, and it's happening in America too. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
no, that can't be the case.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, I'm going to kind of test this theory out, and I'm going to test it, through a working part. So somebody would make a mistake, I'd go to them and they would be upset about it, and especially because again, they're used to at least feigning being upset because they knew how upset I normally got. And so I would go to them and I'd be, okay, so do you know the story of Abraham? I'm like, because his mistake we're still dealing with today, and I doubt your mistake is going to last a couple of millennials. So we're gonna just kind of go through that. Do you know the story of Abraham? Only 2 out of 12 people knew who the story of Abraham was. So I'm like, okay, well, what about Moses? Moses killed somebody. So what about Moses? 3 out of 12 people knew the story of Moses. Now these are major people that Hollywood's done movies about. Disney even did a cartoon about Moses,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they did not know who they were. We're not talking about like Hezekiah, Elisha. We're we're talking about, we're talking about major people of the Bible.
And Peter, let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
You're in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, correct?
Yes. Bible Belt. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're talking about the culture that prides itself on being biblically literate. So,
Yes, and absolutely. But here's the thing that's interesting is when you read the Bible and in Judges, it's just struck me out one time really big, and when in Judges, is that the priest that helped lead the tribe of Dan into idolatry was the grandson of Moses. Now
mm,
we know that only a few people, the next generation, made it to the promised land.
right,
So they died in the wilderness, which meant that child that led the tribe into to idolatry had to have hung around with Moses and Caleb and Joshua. I mean, he had to have been around them. Yet
right.
he lost it. So he may have had knowledge,
Mm,
but it doesn't matter. Now, and here in the South, we go to church, but it doesn't mean we pay attention.
right,
We
right.
we go to Sunday school, but it doesn't mean. I remember a Sunday school class where we spent the entire Sunday school class talking about the NFL standings and who and the odds of the Cowboys getting into the playoffs. I remember that very clearly. It was one of the few lessons of Sunday school that I remembered.
Right,
so so I so no, you're absolutely correct. But
right.
this is also the first generation that I'm referencing whose parents did not have prayer in public schools. So
Mm-hmm.
again, we're looking at two generations away, just like in the Moses situation. So yeah, it just slowly goes away where you kind of, or you may have heard of them, but you don't really know the story about them at all.
Right. So you're a new believer. You're in the Word daily. You are leading a very successful company. You are having all of the success that the world would want. What does that look like for you to transition your company to a marketplace business that had a kingdom mindset? What did that look like?
At first, it was pretty lonely because I would say the majority of the people that worked for me and still work for me are non-believers.
Mm-hmm.
They or casual believers at best. And so the first thing that I said we were going to do is we were going to change our purpose statement. And I changed our purpose statement to say we're here to glorify God by serving others, and we're going to serve and care for our customers and serve and care for our employees. And so I presented that to all of our general managers and above, and I said, okay, this is what we're going to change it to. You're going to be on the front lines having to defend it. So you need to be questioning me on how this works. And nobody would speak. And I mean, when I was in that room, like I felt all alone. I mean, my wife was on board, but she was at home. She works with us, but she wasn't there in that room. So
Right.
it was just kind of me. And I'm like, we can have conversations about everything else. We can't have one about this. And I mean, it was a struggle getting anybody to even talk at that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I realized then was just because I have that fire, nobody else does, and so I have to slow track it in. And so then we started doing things like we hired a chaplains. There's a couple of national organizations that provide chaplains: Corporate Chaplains America, Marketplace Chaplains, or Marketplace Ministry. I can't remember the name of it. And there's local groups that provide chaplains as well. And so we brought in chaplains into our organization. We started praying before meetings. We started doing devotions that would tie in with business. So you want to talk about teamwork, you brought in Nehemiah. And
Mm-hmm.
so we started doing little things like that to start. And then what was fascinating was that people started seeing the change in me, and then they wanted to know more about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was actually easier at that point in time. So when we started holding Bible studies and then and then see Christian events, hey, I'll pay for anyone that wants to go to the Christian event. So since we're going to do that, then I would invite people to those, anybody that wanted to come. And so we created these opportunities for them. And then that was really the first stage of the change, was again slowly introducing them and letting them see the positive impact of it from there.
Mm. Well, and I think what you spoke to is so important that, people have to see you walk it out. They have to see you live it. They have to see that there is something different in who you are. If you're claiming to be a person of faith, they kind of want to see it walked out. So it sounds like you were patient in that process and knew that there was going to be some testing, and that was okay. That you would be able, not by your strength, not by your control, but by the work that God was doing in you, that they would be able to see what was attractive about the Lord.
Well, yeah, and I'll be honest, I think the number one thing that impacted people was my language.
Mm.
Because I took cussing to a whole new level. Like, I was really good at cussing. I mean, that was a unique gift of mine. That I mean, I could put cuss words in the middle of words and just extend them out. I mean, I was really good at it, and I stopped. And I didn't stop and because, oh well, it's wrong to cuss and I got to do that. I didn't stop for any legalistic reason. I just stopped. I didn't want to.
Right.
And so and and then people started seeing that.
Mhm.
People started seeing that part of it. Employees, where before I would care about employees, but I cared about them the same way I care about a piece of equipment. I wanted
Mhm.
it to work. And if
Right.
when it stopped working, I replaced you. I
Mhm.
didn't care about, how they felt and who they were and the struggles they faced and the crises they were going through. And I didn't care about it from that side. And so when they saw that transition, that's where a big part of it was just in my own behaviors. Because a lot of people said, I thought that you weren't real and you were just trying something new to motivate us. And
Mhm.
so there was some backlash from it on that side. But one of the things that was interesting and he's still a non-believer today. He worked for us for probably about another 4 years after this, and then he started his own restaurant. Um, but one of the things I remember hearing him say was he was criticizing other employees who were cussing, and he said, no, we're not allowed to do that. We're a Christian company now. He's not a Christian, but yet he was advocating the values. Because whether or not you believe in Christ, the Christian values are strong and everything. So now we put like Bibles out in the lobby for people to take
Mhm.
whenever they want to, and we spend thousands of dollars on Bibles. We play Christian music, not every song, but probably about 30-40% of our songs are Christian music. And so we try these things, and then I watch our employees become more bold with it. By them seeing the example, they start doing things on their own.
Mhm.
So we had a lady not that long ago. She was 80 something years old, started choking, turned blue. We had a paramedic that happened to be working for us, and he went over there and he was having to do chest compressions, like CPR, like it was bad. And another employee just ran over, just grabbed her hands and started praying for her. And then other people started praying with the customers that were around watching this happen. you know
Mhm.
6 years ago they would have been punished for that. it
Right.
wasn't just uh it wasn't just a it would have been like, no, you're not allowed to bring that in. So it
Mhm.
wasn't just even before of we were just kind of ambivalent. It was
Right.
not allowed.
Wow. Wow. Well, Peter, I am so grateful for all you've shared, and I hope that we'll be able to maybe have a part two, because I want to dive into some of the truths in your book and so many other things we haven't gotten to. But maybe one last question before we wrap up our this particular podcast. You've mentioned your wife and a couple of different times being involved in your work and also just in your faith journey. What role has she played in this? How much has that contributed to your journey?
Well, so oh my goodness, so much. So we had tremendous marital problems. Matter of fact, our marriage counselor told us to get a divorce. So that just kind of, I mean, he was like, I can't do anything for you. And so she grew up Christian, strong Christian. And so she said, I'm going to change my prayer. And so instead of asking God to change me, she said, God, I want you to teach me how to love him. And
Mm,
when that started happening, our marriage got saved to a point, and then God took care of me, which
mm,
then made me realize what my role was as as a husband.
mhm,
And but what's funny is in the book there's a chapter, and it's so wonderful. The chapter's titled "Jealous of Jesus," because my wife was talking about how because she moved from number one in my life to number two, and it was a
mm,
struggle for her. And so we kind of had to work through that part of the process, but at the same time she was always encouraging me. She was always she counsels a lot of the women that work for us, and she prays for people throughout the restaurant, and and doing those type of stuff. I mean, but she's been absolutely 100% just um amazing in this process. And again, it hasn't been like it's simple. It's not like she and I never fight anymore. Like, oh, well, no, we're married. We're going to fight. And that's part. But the difference is that we're secure because God is first. And that's the difference. So since God is first in our marriage, now all of a sudden now we have a uh, uh, since we put him first, there's a security in our marriage that even when we're disagreeing, even when we're arguing, we know we're okay. And therefore, when I go to work, I know that she has my back and I have hers. And it's just, it's completely transformed just the way we see the world just by us being together like that.
Well, Peter, I can't thank you enough for, like I've said before, but it's just so refreshing to hear someone's authentic story, unfiltered, the real things that happen. Because whether you are someone who is solid in your faith and mature in your faith, it's just a healthy reminder to go, no, even in the best of marriages, there's conflict, but my husband and I always say, it's not that I trust Chris, it's that I trust God with Chris. And it's not that he trusts Karen, it's that he trusts God with Karen. And when you do both put the Lord first, it does bring a security. But to hear you describe it in a way that everybody can relate and normalize what it's like to live in a fallen world, but at the same time, to know that you are making a difference in the city of Murfreesboro and in the lives of specific individuals that are your employees and all the way into your entire community. So I just want to, on behalf of Lead Like Jesus, tell you thank you so much for the way that you're modeling that, what you're teaching us. And please tell our audience here, if they want to get your book, Afraid to Trust, where can they go if they want to have you come in to maybe their business or to come speak? What's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
So you can always order the book through Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can download it on Kindle. But we also have a website for it too if you want to order it direct, called afraidtotrust.com. On there, you can get links to our e-commerce site, to our restaurant site. So if you want to know more about it that way, there's also a way to contact me directly. So if you want me to speak to groups, or I just got back from the Detroit area speaking up there. So speak to groups or churches or whatever the situation is. You can always send me a contact us form through that, and those actually come directly to me as well. So it's even if you just want prayers, I mean, that's prayers matter. And so we want to be able to honor everybody who needs that type of support as well. So, but the website is afraidtotrust.com. It's all one word, afraidtotrust.com.
Well, thank you so much, Peter DeMis, and I look forward to hopefully part 2. And thank you so much. Anybody who would like some more information about Lead Like Jesus, you can also go to leadlikejesus.com. Take care.
Thank you so much again.